the team on my back. I do it all for the family. Everyone think they can rap. Nobody ever gon' challenge me. Starting my week on a Sunday. They think they can make it in one day. I just been ready to take off. Waiting my turn on the runway. Never be turning around. Never be turning around. Ayy. Never be.
All right, in the shop today we have a Trackhawk. We're going to be doing some Eibach lowering springs, and we are going to be putting an Incognito pulley on. And I'll show you guys that in just a moment. Got a fan on it right now, cooling the engine off, so it won't be too hot to work on. So let's get started. Spring install is pretty straightforward. We just have the upper strut nuts. There's 3 of them. Then we got the sway bar link. Then always undo these sensors and everything, obviously, because this whole thing's got to come out. And then we'll put the strut over onto the strut spring compressor, and we'll get these swapped out. Pretty straightforward. Level of difficulty, probably 2 out of 10, and it's a 1 out of 10 since I have a lift and a spring compressor. The back, it's a little different. I'll just lower the shock and put a jack underneath it, then it should drop down enough to where I can snake this spring out. Worst case, undo one of the lower control arm bolts, swing it down just enough to get it out. Now, since the new spring is going to be shorter, it'll be much easier to get in versus the stock one coming out, but pretty easy. All right, so we're moving on to the pulley install, which is pretty straightforward. You just take the crank bolt out. There is a locking tool that I'll show you guys underneath here in a minute. Then this Incognito pulley here, it literally is just machined, perfectly machined, and it slips over the crank pulley, making obviously a larger diameter, which in turn turns the supercharger faster. So we just got to get that crank bolt out, then slip this over. Then there's 3 locating bolts. Then you just put some Loctite on those, and then just tighten them down, torque them to spec, then put the crank bolt in, torque it to spec, remove the tool from down below, which again, I'll show you guys what that is. Then we will route the new belt, and I'll show you what has to be added to the accessory drive in order to make that work. So what gets added to the accessory drive is you remove the tensioner. Then there's this little shim here, and then what that will do is it's going to move the belt tensioner out, space it out just enough to compensate for the difference in thickness of the Incognito. So we're going to get this bolted back on, then we'll slip the Incognito on, and I'll show you guys that. All right, so on the Trackhawk, you do have to completely remove the radiator fan because there's just no space to get the Incognito in there. So drain the coolant a little bit, took off the top radiator hose. Then there's a couple of spots where the lower radiator hose actually makes a connection onto the fan shroud itself. So take that off. Then the electrical connector, then part of the radiator here, there's no bolts. You actually have to push in the little like tab here. And with that pushed in, then you can pop it out and slide it up. And then there's a few other little odds and ends that you have to kind of get out of the way. And just very carefully snake that radiator fan out. Then you can get everything in and get it all torqued down, get the belt routed, and now we're ready to go back together. All right, so at first glance, it looks completely stock. Got a black belt on the supercharger. Nothing looks different. But if you zoom in down here, take a closer look, you'll see the Incognito is installed. Now this takes it from like 11.6 pounds of boost to just a little tick over 13, and with no PCM, no tune, no nothing, just bolt it on and go. I believe, what does it make, like 60 additional horsepower, Rick?
About 60 to the wheels.
Yeah, 60 to the wheels. It's pretty impressive. And we also lowered it, put the Eibach Pro kit on here. Kind of walk around the car, not get ran over. So the Eibach Pro kit on the Trackhawk gives it a nice aggressive stance. It's not too drastic, but definitely, man, it definitely looks aggressive. Let's go for a ride in this thing.
The speed limit is 45 miles per hour.
That had to be faster than 3.6. I've done a 3.3 in this thing.
Well, it might be spinning now too.
That's true. It could be. Okay, so maybe I won't go back with the stock